Phrases for School by French for Students by Students.
Created genuinely by 5 students from James Bruce Agricultural High School in Sydney, Australia.
So grab a notepad and pen or just follow along with our phrases sheet found in the printable section of our website.
If you're watching this video on YouTube, you can find our website at FrenchForStudentsByStudentsWeebly.com. Links in the description.
In this video, you will learn some useful phrases that may be used in a school environment.
Firstly, we will begin with the phrases which teachers may use in a school environment. Let us start with, please stand up.
Firstly, we need the vocabulary. Lever, which is stand, vous, which is you, and s'il vous plaît, which is please. The complete phrase is levez-vous s'il vous plaît. Now let's move on to please sit down.
For this command, we will need the following words. Asseyez, which means sit down, vous, which means you, and s'il vous plaît, which means please. The complete sentence is asseyez-vous s'il vous plaît. Our next phrase is, please be quiet.
Before we learn this phrase, we will need to know a few words. Calmer, which means calm, vous, which means you, s'il vous plaît, which means please. Now we can compile this vocabulary. The end result is calmez-vous s'il vous plaît. The next phrase is get your books out.
The vocabulary we will need in order to learn this phrase are sortez, which means exit, vos, which means your, and livre, which means books. Now we can put these words together to form the sentence, which is sortez vos livres. Now let's move on to the next phrase. Close the door.
For this sentence, we will need these words. Fermez, which is close, la, which is the, and porte, which is door. Combining these words, we result in a sentence, fermez la porte. Next, we have open the window.
For this, we will need the following words. Ouvrez, which means open, la, which means the, and fenêtre, which means window. Again, we will combine these words, thus getting the phrase ouvrez la fenêtre. Now we will learn a phrase which we hope is never used, get out.
In order to learn this phrase, we will only need one word, sortez, which means exit. So, the full phrase is just sortez. Let us start with the question of may I go to the toilet? To say this question, this vocabulary is required. Est-ce que, which means what or who. Je, which means I. Peut, which means can. Aller, which means to go. Au, which means to the. And toilette, which means toilet. These combined words form the sentence. Est-ce que je peux aller aux toilettes? Now the next very polite phrase is excuse me.
For this, we will need to know the following vocabulary. Excuse, which means excuse. Moi, which means me. Monsieur, which means sir. Madame, which means madam. So for instance, before we ask to go to the toilet, we may say excuse moi, monsieur, or excuse moi, madame. The next phrase is how do you spell that?
In order for you to say this phrase properly, we will first need some vocabulary. Comment, which is how, ça, which is that or this, and s'écrit, which is write itself. The sentence is comment ça s'écrit, which literally translates to how does that write itself. Similarly, you may need to ask what something means. For this phrase, we need these words. Qu'est-ce que, which means what, ça, which means that or this, veut, which means what, and dire, to say. The question is, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, which literally translates to, what does that want to say? The next phrase is used quite often. Can you please help me?
For this phrase, these words must be needed. pouvez, which means can, vous, which means you, m'aider, which means help, and s'il vous plaît, which means please. Now we can combine this to make the phrase pouvez-vous m'aider s'il vous plaît. The next phrase is, can you please repeat yourself?
For this question, we will need to know some words. Pouvez, which means can, vous, which means you, répéter, which means repeat, and s'il vous plaît, which means please. The complete question is pouvez-vous vous répéter s'il vous plaît? So, another polite word you will need to know is sorry.
In order to say this, we only need one word, pardon, which means sorry or excuse me. Therefore, you simply just say pardon in order to say sorry or excuse me. Our last phrase for this video is, can I borrow this?
Before you say this, you will need the words je, which means I, peux, which means can, emprunter, which means borrow, votre, which means your for singular, and vos, which means your for plural. So when you want to borrow something, you will say je peux emprunter votre and state the object, or je peux emprunter vos and then the objects.
If you have any questions, contact us via email or on Google+.
Au revoir!